You're listening to the Proposify Biz Chat with Kyle Racky, a podcast for entrepreneurs looking to scale. This episode is brought to you by Proposify, software that streamlines your proposal process, impresses clients, and helps you close more deals. Head to proposify.com to start your free trial today.
I'm Kyle Racky, and you're listening to episode 68 of the Proposify Biz Chat. On today's show, Kevin Springer is joining me in the studio. We're talking about hiring a business coach, what it did for our business, and what it could do for yours, too. All right. That was my Matthew McConaughey impression. It's the only thing I know how to say, but like him. All right.
There could be a lot of people in Texas.
You would know more than I would.
We have a couple of folks going to Texas soon.
Well, that was quite a nice segue, Kevin. We do. We're going, where are we going?
The Digital Agency Summit.
Growth Summit.
Oh, excuse me. Yes. We must grow.
So I was there actually last year. Ryan on our team came down, and then this year we thought, hey, let's give some other folks a try.
Let's coach them in going.
You're just all about the segues today. So yeah, Patrick and Jen on our team are going to head down to Austin. If you were in the Austin area and listening to this, and you, especially if you run an agency, you would want to try to get in on this. This is for digital marketer partners. So for those who aren't familiar with Digital Marketer, they're a great company. You should check them out. They're all about training people up on the latest marketing tactics. And Ryan Dice is the owner of Digital Marketer.
And the Marcus man will be there.
Yes, Marcus Murphy. He's a great guy. Miss him. Going to see him again in February when we go to Traffic and Conversion, also put on by Digital Marketer.
In beautiful San Diego.
Yes, I'm quite a bit more excited about going to San Diego. Nothing against Austin or Texas, but I'm excited about going back to San Diego. I didn't actually get to see very much of Austin when I went there. When we got the cab to the airport to head back, that was probably when I got to see the most. And my cab driver, I'm not used to this. He had a very thick Texas accent. And we said, "Oh, where's something in the city?" And he said, "Oh, that's over yonder." I was like, "Wow!" Somebody actually says that.
Yeah, every part of this continent. Let's face it, everybody has their own sayings. Like that same saying in Maine can't get there from here. Right. Some directions. I mean, it's just yeah,
exactly,
part of the culture.
What's the Newfoundland one? It's not where you to. Where you at? Oh no, what are you at?
Okay,
that's a Newfoundland expression. What are you at?
Really?
It's like saying what's up or
cool.
Where are you going?
I like it.
What are you at? So, one thing we want to talk about today is coaching. It's a big passion of yours, Kevin. Maybe you should tell the listeners about your coaching experience. Remember, keep it to 20 minutes.
I'll bore the hell out of them. Mine's all athletic coaching for the most part.
That's how most people think of coaching.
I've run a lot of businesses and coached people, but really at the end of the day, that's my passion. It's one of my hobbies. I've been doing it since the 80s, actually. Coaching basketball, baseball, a little bit of football, track and field.
Yeah.
Now doing a lot more basketball. But
and you've coached many different ages too, right?
Absolutely. All ages pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what I try to, especially as the kids get older, try to really communicate how a lot of what we learn on the court or on the field extends into our real life.
Yeah. Well, the reason I wanted to bring this up was because we recently hired a business coach. We had Dan Martell on the podcast in the past, earlier this year actually, and at some point after that, Dan came back to me and he said, "Hey, if you and some people on your team want to do like a 1-day retreat at my place, he kind of gave us an offer." Took him up on it, and then we got a few people on our leadership team, leaders of various departments, to come with us. We drove up to Moncton, New Brunswick, which is about maybe 3 hours from where we're at, and we did a 1-day coaching session with Dan. And we weren't really entirely sure what we wanted to get out of it at the beginning, but we kind of talked about some of the challenges that we have, some of the goals that we're trying to reach, and then we kind of let him just lead the conversation. And I think we all walked out of it pretty impressed. We got out of it more than we even thought we would. And we were actually still seeing the results, the fruitage of that coaching session even now. Definitely our leaders are a lot more engaged. We've been taking very tactical, hands-on kind of tips and applying them, and we're starting to see the results of that. So it was an awesome experience.
Definitely exceeded everybody's expectations. I mean, we knew Dan was sharp, and he's done amazing things in business, and we just didn't know what to expect. But it was excellent. I mean, like you were saying, I mean, it's still working, I guess you could say. I mean, and what Dan does, which is great, is it's not just a one session; it's an ongoing coaching experience, which I like about it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's important when you go to a coach, is to make sure that there's follow up. You know, you're not just going to one session, and whether it's the follow up with the person who is the coach, or I think it's important that someone takes the lead in a sense, and kind of to bring it back and to make sure that we're all doing it, which is pretty much what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, you're making sure that we're having our timely meetings. We're using Basecamp to manage it, and it's working out well. I'm seeing some real positive things going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So of the many things that we took away from that session, Dan had said something like teams that pulse together, grow together, and pulse as in, you know, like having a weekly cadence schedule for the leadership team and also various departments is important, because if you just meet when there's something specific to talk about and there's no real regularity behind it, then you can kind of fall behind or become too reactive and not proactive. And so we've been doing this where we're having weekly meetings with the department heads, and we've just had a little bit more structure and a little more rigor around what we're doing, and we found that's really helping us get through some of our organizational challenges.
And you mentioned cadence, and he talked a lot about that, and that's huge. I mean, we see almost more urgency around a lot of these things, these issues that we're working through.
And I think also because we're meeting weekly, and our department heads are meeting with their people weekly. You know, there's so many things that come up throughout the day. Oh, check out this article. Oh, check this out. Hey, here's an idea that just popped in my head. Maybe we should do this. But forcing ourselves to have a shared Google Doc where we put these things, and then once a week we talk about them. That keeps everybody freed up to focus on their most important tasks for the day and not get sidetracked. Because that's, you know, it's a big problem, I think, in every company. It's just easily getting sidetracked into conversations, into meetings, into, let's explore this idea and chat about it, but it's really not going to move the needle today or this week or this month. So it's like goal setting from a yearly, annual, weekly basis. That's really what a lot of it is about. And I suspect that with sport coaching, it's a lot of the same.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have the obvious common goal as a team is to win, and for us, we want we can measure. That's one thing too I liked about this session too, is how to measure each department's win. And then how does that collectively work as a win for the whole company?
Yeah,
that's what I like about it, and it very much parallels that.
Yeah, it's kind of like to keep going with the sports analogy. On a football team, you've got your defensive team, your offense, your special units, right?
Yep.
And it's like each of them have their own goals that they're trying to meet, but it all serves the team's goal.
Well, it's interesting because Dan even mentions he doesn't watch sports, but in one of the last calls we had with him, he was using a comparison to the last Super Bowl, for example, of how you just can't give up. And you look at what the Patriots did, being down from so much and the deficit, and he was there, and he said it just, it's just a lot of. Coaches are, very motivating, and he's one of those coaches.
Yeah. Which brings up a good question of what do you look for in a coach? Because if I can see a lot of people being skeptical about it, and kind of, do I really need a coach? Do I need to pay the money and put in the time? Is it really worth it? And also, is this coach the right one for us? I think that there's a tendency to kind of feel like, well, I would get coached by Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, but if the coach, I can't really see much that they've done for themselves. Like they haven't climbed Mount Everest or walked on the moon themselves. So who are they to kind of coach us? What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of that stems back to, I think some coaches get a bad rap. And I think, you think back to when we were at Headspace, I used to go to a lot of networking events because it was locally, our client base was pretty local. And every other person in those networking groups at the time were life coaches. And you kind of looked at them and you're going, geez, I don't know if I really want you coaching my life. you know, and I think we sometimes, make assumptions without really delving into, like I think even with Dan, I mean, we knew he was good and we knew he had a lot of great success in business, but we didn't know what kind of coach he was going to be, and it just was amazing. Mm-hmm. So I guess you got to, you can't prejudge, I guess.
Like in sports, are a lot of the best coaches former players?
Some of the greats, I think of the NFL, for example, didn't play. But, of course, a lot of coaches are ex-players. Yeah. And a lot of times they're not maybe players that were the top. I think coaches, there's a certain thing you're born with. There's a certain, you have to have, coaching's a tough thing. I mean, it's not for everybody. Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to really express yourself, communication, be a really good listener, and, of course, understand the game you're playing one thing Dan said is it's instead of watching sports and whatnot, he's just obsessed with reading books on business and on what he's doing and learning more. And
which goes to show, like you said, coaches have to understand the game much better than the average person, maybe even better than players. Yes. And you can understand, so if your business is in SaaS or agency work or anything, your coach should understand your industry or your business model very well, right? Like if your coach is an expert in the construction industry, well, they're probably not going to be the best coach for your SaaS business because, even though a lot of general business advice carries through, there's a lot of specialized knowledge depending on the market that you're in. So I think they should know your industry. It doesn't necessarily mean that they had to have had the biggest, most successful business in your industry. True. They could have read a lot. They could have gone to a lot of conferences, had some businesses, and just have coached a lot and just seen it all.
Sometimes it's probably better for coaches from every aspect to maybe not have been very specialized within a company because they can look at the big picture more so. I find that it kind of always reminded me a bit of a sound man. I used to hire soundmen for Norton's, and if you had a drummer running the sound, the drums are always too loud. Yeah. And I think that's same with coaching a lot of times, maybe especially in sports. If you're a defensive specialist, maybe, you're focusing too much on the defense, or in business, same thing. I mean, if someone that looks at the big picture and understands business, understands your industry, but understands at a very high level, how to achieve certain goals. And then, but then again, on Dan, he can drill down. He's very well versed in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it all makes sense though, that he, using that drummer analogy, like he doesn't come from, I'm just purely a developer or purely a marketer. It's pretty well rounded. And using that music analogy too, you look at, say, one of the best music producers of all time was George Martin. Right. And he was a musician. He could write, he could compose, but he wasn't necessarily a pop star. Right. He didn't have to be. He could coach the pop stars. Oh yeah, he could coach the Beatles. For those who don't know who George Martin is,
the Beatles may not have been the Beatles.
Yeah,
they would have been the Beatles, but not as successful without him.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that should help clear up in people's minds anyway. Of don't disregard a coach or the idea of even having a coach just because you can't get somebody who's way better than you are in exactly what you do. A lot of the world's best business owners, your Richard Bransons, your Mark Cubans, they've all had people who advise them, people who mentor them, who maybe aren't even as successful as them. Because it's just, I think, helpful having an outsider's opinion of somebody who, when you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, co-founders can sometimes coach and motivate each other. But I think if somebody's outside of that, and they're not financially reliant on, because when you're in a business, it's your bread and butter. It's how you pay your bills, and you're very much in the weeds of things, and you make decisions based off of the financial need behind decisions you make. Whereas an outside coach can kind of look at it from a bigger picture, I think, anyway.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where do you think people should go to look for? If somebody, is listening to this and they run a business and they're thinking maybe I should look at getting a coach, what are some kind of tips we could give them?
Well, I think number one is reach out to your peers within, the sector that you're in. Like, for example, if you're running a SaaS company and you're in the IT sector, talking to people that have been through it, and word of mouth is the best way to go to start out. And Dan came highly recommended, and so I think that's a good starting point. I think it's the best starting point. It's overwhelming. There are a lot out there.
Yeah.
What's your suggestion around that?
Probably the same, I would think. I would suspect that no matter what industry you're in, you're going to find somebody. You probably already know who that person is. Maybe they're, maybe they're considered an influencer in the space. Maybe they've got a popular blog or podcast, and they also offer one-on-one coaching. I think if they're good at marketing themselves, you'll probably know who they are.
What about board? We get coached by our board, especially one person in particular, and I think when you're starting out, for those of you listening, they're starting out, make sure you really take your time in finding the right board members, because they'll be your best coaches, your best fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, especially if they're not running startups where they've raised money, and sometimes you're legally required to have a board. Usually you are if you're running a startup and you raise money from outside investors. It's a requirement to have a board. And let's face it, we may not have had a board if we didn't have to. But I think it's really helpful that we do. Especially in the first few years, it was very helpful having kind of these other people that we're accountable to for monthly reporting, for goal setting, for saying, here's what we did last month, here's what we plan to do this month. These were the results. We either hit our goals or we didn't. Here's some challenges we're having. It's kind of almost therapeutic to be able to put that out there, to have to somebody trusted who's going to keep that confidential and give you some advice.
And we were fortunate too, because we have two board members that have been in our shoes.
Yeah,
They've
entrepreneurs.
Industry experience within, actually both in SaaS too.
Yeah, absolutely. One in particular, Ben, ran an accelerator in the past too, so he'd also had a lot of companies go through that accelerator. And I think that's one of the biggest, traits of a good coach is that they've seen a lot. They've had a lot of people come, either through their training program or through their accelerator or what it is. So they've seen a lot of different scenarios. This company raised money and this happened. Here's some mistakes I've seen. I think actually that's probably more important than them themselves necessarily having had all that experience firsthand, is actually been a third-party witness to a lot of things.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, if people don't have board of directors necessarily, I think setting up a board of advisors is probably, there's less legal stuff around it, but it's also very helpful. So if you have a mentor, if you have anybody who you like getting advice from and hitting up every now and then, maybe getting them to kind of commit more regularly to being on your board of advisors, maybe doing quarterly board meetings. It's a good way to kind of create that regularity, I think, and just sort of, get some outsiders. The great thing is that you can always ignore people's advice, right? You don't have to take it.
Yeah.
But just hearing it is important. Because sometimes, like, we've been in the midst of, in the past, of raising money, and we've brought some concerns or issues to some of our advisors, and, they're somewhat detached from it, so they can kind of give you that other perspective and go, all right, the world isn't ending, like, here's this, like, also look at this over here, or look at it from the other person's, you know what I mean? They kind of give you that nice counterbalance.
Balance is key. Yep, I like that.
Balance is key, and I hope if anybody is thinking about getting coached or setting up a board of advisors or mentors, I hope this is valuable. I'd love to know if people have questions about that, or if there's an area we haven't fully explored. With that said, Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this, so you get more of it every week. And we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Proposify Biz Chat with Kyle Racky. For more episodes, check us out on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Click subscribe to get updated on the latest episodes, and be sure to rate and review.